Hey UEA, welcome to our next interview in the general election series. Today I'll be speaking to David Simister-Thomas, the Conservative candidate for Norwich South. Let's hear what he has to say. Hello David, thank you for coming and doing an interview with us today.
Pleasure.
Did you want to start by just telling us a little bit about yourself, what you've done up until now, that sort of thing?
Yeah, of course. So I'm David. I was a head teacher here at Norwich South, and I'm now standing as the Conservative Party candidate at the general election.
Okay, I guess we'll start with the questions that we're asking to all of the candidates that are coming in. What are the motivations for you for standing in the general election?
So I was a head teacher, and when you're a head teacher, you're in a really privileged position of being able to see into people's lives and all of the different things that are affecting people and what's going on, and you want to do the very best that you can for them and see the best future for them. And you control quite a lot when you're running a school, but you don't control everything. And as I was just thinking more and more about the things that I wanted to do to help my kids, I realised that stepping outside of school and being able to be involved in and influence some of the other things might help me be able to do that. So I really believe in the potential that's inside of every young person who grows up in this country, and I know that there are too many challenges that they face in trying to reach it, particularly kids from more disadvantaged backgrounds. And so I want to try and build a country where every child from every background can go and be successful.
Yeah. So why particularly Norwich South? I mean, being a university constituency, what made you choose this one?
I ran a school here.
Yeah.
So when I think about Norwich South, this isn't some kind of, I don't know, sometimes political candidates get kind of parachuted in somewhere, or it's the next place on the rota and they've not really got a connection. I mean, for me, Norwich South isn't just a place that I happen to land. These are my kids that I taught, and their families and their communities, and I feel a huge kind of, attachment and duty, I suppose, here to try and do what I can for them.
Okay, I think that's all the questions that we're asking with all the candidates. Now we've got specific ones that have come in by UVA students. So the first one we sort of got sent in was after 14 years of Conservatives being in power, there's been numerous scandals, so Partygate, Brexit. How do you plan on rebuilding trust with the public?
So, look, there's a set of things there that are scandals for a reason, because they were wrong, and I'm not going to defend those things. I think they were wrong. I ran a school through the middle of pandemic and lockdown. I didn't have parties in the staff room. I stopped being a head teacher and moved to another role when that third lockdown was coming back in. And so I had to hand over my office and my keys, and I remember locking up my office, locking up the building, and posting the keys back through the letterbox after I turned the lights off. I didn't have a leaving party. Because that was the right thing to do. We had a set of rules and they had to be followed. So I absolutely regret that there are people from my party who didn't follow those rules, and there's no way of me defending that. How do we rebuild trust? I think it's by apologising where we need to, and by selecting candidates who are good people. And I guess the only way that I can rebuild trust as a person is by working my hardest and being my kind of best honest self.
Thank you. We recently did an interview with our Vice Chancellor, David Maguire, and we got onto the topic of funding of university. And he told Jamie and I that he thought the funding system of university was broken. And because of this, we had a lot of students come with lots of questions, but this one particularly said, what would you do to bring focus to the issue of a broken university funding system and ultimately help fix the higher education system?
Yeah. So we've made a load of changes to the way that higher education works over the last 14 years, and I think a lot of them have been really positive. I think it's time to take stock and see kind of where are we, what have been the impact of those, and where did you get the desired effect, and where did you have unintended consequences. And one of the things that's happened, of course, is that we've removed student cap numbers from a lot of places. We've seen take-up of higher education massively increase, and we've seen take-up of higher education for people from more disadvantaged backgrounds significantly increased. So people who are from a background who before might not have gone to university are now going to university, and the proportion of them who are going to university has really, really increased, and the proportion of people at university from disadvantaged backgrounds has increased. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That has definitely put its toll on the way that the funding system has worked. I don't think people quite knew the extent to which that was going to happen. And one of the things that we have to do is look at how we can make sure that we've got a really sustainable higher education system. Higher education is one of the massive assets of this country, and thinking just about Norwich is one of the massive assets of Norwich. I mean, how many cities are there that can benefit from having some world-class universities in the city that are also around the city, set up the ways to be able to turn the things coming out of those universities into business that booms the economy, right? The research park's just over there.
Yeah.
So I think it's huge assets, and we've got to be doing everything that we can to help them grow and feel sustainable.
Right. So in recent months, there's been members of our transgender community at UEA have expressed their feelings of sort of not feeling very safe, unheard of, and even unwanted by some UK politicians, and particularly in some cases by the Conservative Party. With this in mind, we had a student who asked, what are your views on the Tory proposal to ban transgender individuals from single-sex spaces?
So look, it's really sad to think about anyone in our society feeling like they're not wanted here,
yeah.
And that they're not respected here. And this is an issue where too often we forget that we're talking about people, and where debates about philosophy, which are kind of debates about philosophy that people should be allowed to have in a free society, become talked about in a way that forget that we're talking about real people, and real people should all be treated with respect and dignity and compassion. And we all know, right, that people in the transgender community have a really tough time. And I know I've worked with some of those children through some of those really, really difficult periods, and I don't know how you could do that and feel anything other than compassion and a really real strong desire to support those people. And so I really regret and I'm sorry that people feel like that. And on the substance, as a general rule, I think that I think that people should be treated as they want to be treated. And I don't think that government has a role looking inside of people's pants and saying how they're allowed to present and how they're allowed to talk about themselves. And we should treat people in the way they want to be treated and respect their rights. I think there are times when there are rights of different groups that come into conflict, and those are times where there are people who have fought for their sex-based rights and want those, and they're important. And there are transgender people who have rights that are important, and those two come into conflict. And in a bunch of those cases, there isn't a straightforward answer of it should always be this. I just don't believe there is a straightforward it should always be this case. I absolutely think that we should have some single-sex spaces. Mm-hmm. There are certain places where people who are biologically women need to feel safe and comfortable because they might have been through some really, really challenging things under the hands of people who are biologically men. And I think it's reasonable for them to say, I feel intimidated by people who are biologically men right now. I think that's a reasonable thing that I want to respect and have compassion for. And we've got to do that in a way that is also compassionate for people who are transgender who also need some support. But I think it is acceptable in a bunch of those cases to say, look, rights are in conflict and we need to find a way of protecting both. And there are also cases where that is going to need some single-sex spaces.
Okay, thank you. Our next student, Arthur, sort of along the lines of you being a head teacher. So, having been a head teacher of a secondary school, how is it that you are standing for a party that, over the last 14 years, has so detrimentally impacted the futures of young people through increasing house prices, extortionate tuition fees, and exploitative 0-hour contracts?
All right. So let me do the education bit first, and then let me do the what is the future for young people bit. So on education, I think we've done a really good job, and I want to stand up and be proud of it. Mm-hmm. We are now, or in England as a country, our children are the best at reading in the Western world. That was not the case 14 years ago. We are almost the best at maths in the Western world. That was not the case 14 years ago. 14 years ago, only about 60% of people were studying science meaningfully up to 16. Now almost everybody does. These are huge changes in what people are learning and the skills that people are acquiring and the lives people are going to be able to build for themselves off the back of having a better education. And I think we should be proud of that. That's not saying that there's not more to be done. Of course there is. But we're in a really good place and we should be proud of where we're at. Mm-hmm. But there was also a strong hinge of like, okay, fine, you've given me all of this knowledge, you've given me all of these skills, but I'm not seeing the future that I want off the back of them. And I don't think that the Conservative Party has created extortionate house prices. I do think we've not been building enough houses in this country. That is a thing that I think all political parties should share some responsibility for. Mm. If you want to look at when house prices most rocketed relative to incomes, it was under Tony Blair's government. But I'm not just laying the foot for blame there because I want us to have done even more about it. Ultimately, what we need to do is increase the supply of houses in this country so that everyone can afford to buy a house. I would love to see us being much more radical about house building. I'd love to see us moving towards a zoning model where it is much easier to build as long as you're following a set of rules rather than having to apply for permission. I would love to see us fast-tracking bureaucracy, particularly around building on brownfield sites. I would love to see us improving rights for renters. If we make really big strides towards increasing the supply of housing, that is the only way, ultimately, that we're going to see house prices becoming more affordable for people. And I think it's the issues with house prices that a lot of other problems come back to the root of. So I want to see us doing an awful lot more building.
Yeah. While we're just talking about sort of your experience with education, that sort of thing, this isn't on there, so you don't have to answer it, honestly. But I'm curious your thoughts on Rishi's involvement in the compulsory national service that they're wanting to introduce, what your thoughts are on that, and how you also think that students are feeling about that in a school.
I've spoken to a lot of young people, so I know how people are feeling. Yeah. and it's not particularly positive about it. Look, I think there was a world where we maybe could have sat out the case for that a little bit differently. The problem that you're trying to solve is there are too many young people going out into the workplace saying they don't feel like they have the skills and experiences, that they haven't acquired the skills and experiences that are going to make them really successful at work. And there are too many employers saying they feel that as well. So something isn't quite right there. Yeah. We've seen a big decline in the rate at which people are working whilst in education, taking part-time jobs and so on, which used to provide a lot of that. And we've seen a big decline in volunteering, which used to provide a lot of that. So what we're trying to do is to say that there are a set of skills and experiences that if you can acquire those, they're going to set you up better for life. And they're hard to get at the moment. It's not easy to say, I want a really meaningful volunteering experience where I can get some great experience I can put on my CV that's going to make me attractive to employers, because people aren't incentivised to provide something that's really meaningful. I think if we can build a structure whereby you get a guarantee for a year of being able to have experience over the course of that year where you're acquiring some really meaningful skills in areas that you're going to be able to take and put on your CV, where you haven't just been sort of standing around making coffee, but you've been doing really meaningful stuff. Mm-hmm. That is going to help people as they start out in work, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, thank you. This is what we were discussing a bit earlier about a student came up to us at the student union hustings that there were, sort of talking about net zero and climate change, things like that. And so we had a student say that they were horrified and disgusted at the way in which Rishi Sunak has politicised and rolled back on the net zero climate pledges. Indeed, last week we saw a recent ex-Tory minister announce he would be voting Labour because of that situation. So how would you approach climate change issues if elected? And can you name a policy that's coming through that will help us see or reach net zero UEA by 2045?
Yeah, so I think we should be really proud of our record on climate change. And I don't think we talk about it enough. I think we're too shy about our record on climate change. The UK was the first major economy in the world to halve its emissions relative to 1990 levels, which was the first kind of big target on the international agreements. We have brought our CO2 emissions per capita in the UK down to levels that were last seen in this country in the 1850s, the 1950s to 1850s. We have moved our energy mix from 7% zero carbon in 2010 to half to 50% zero carbon now. Those are huge achievements, and we are genuinely leading the world on that. And so we can go and sit at the table with other countries and say with our head held high that we are leading the charge on climate change, and that's the place that we want to be as a country. So I'm proud of that, and I reject the idea that we haven't been doing a good job on it, because I really think that we have. But of course we're not done, right? 50% of the energy mix being zero carbon is half. It's a lot better than 7% where it was when we took over, but it's not the whole way there. So there are next steps that we need to take. Then there are things like we need to be switching our transport infrastructure. We need to be retrofitting homes and domestic insulation, which is one of the big things that's coming next. So I think we have got a really strong record on it. In terms of what's going to really make the difference next, if I look back and say what has made the difference between today and 2000 or 1990, what's allowed us to have those huge changes, it has been the fact that we have been a country where you can develop and grow great technology that is able to reduce people's emissions. Right? That is the thing that has been the biggest shift, is that our technology is getting better, we're becoming much more efficient at building things, it's becoming much cheaper to be building things like renewable energy, and we, and indeed people at UEA and in Norwich, have been at the forefront of that. And so if we're thinking about what's going to make the big difference for 2045 and thinking kind of 20 years ahead, it is investing now and supporting now all of the development and the technology that we'll all be taking for granted then, because I think that is going to be the thing that is going to really shift us. I mean, we've seen this week, right, the company that made the iPhone battery have announced that they've invented a ceramic battery that has 100 times greater power density than a current lithium-ion battery. If you get that to happen, that is a complete game changer in all kinds of things. It's going to allow us to swap out places where at the moment you can't electrify and you're still stuck on fossil fuels. So that I think is the big route over a 20-year time horizon.
That was all the questions that we had from students. But thank you for your time.
Pleasure.
It's lovely to see you, and good luck with the campaign. Thank you for watching our interview with David from the Conservative Party. Don't forget to subscribe to our new YouTube channel where we will be interviewing Labour and Liberal Democrat candidates.